Gabriel's hands trembled on the steering wheel as the relentless rain pounded against the windshield, blurring the highway lights into streaks of neon. The birthday cake, carefully boxed and secured on the passenger seat, had survived the 12-hour drive from Chicago to Kansas City, but his resolve was cracking under the weight of his mother's voice echoing through the car speakers just moments ago. "You're sinful for chasing that life with a man." She had spat her words, cutting deeper than the storm outside. How had she even found out? Gabriel wiped the fog from the glass with the back of his hand, his eyes stinging from exhaustion and something far heavier. He had left at dawn with nothing but a thermos of coffee and the carefully chosen cake layered with Liam's favorite vanilla and fresh strawberries, because turning 30 deserved something special, something that said, "I see you, I love you, even when the world tries to tear us apart." The wipers slashed back and forth like a metronome, counting down the miles to Liam's apartment, where a small group of friends would be waiting with balloons and quiet understanding. But now every mile felt like a betrayal of the boy he once was, the one who sat in his father's tractor listening to sermons about sin and salvation. Gabriel glanced at the phone resting in the cup holder, the screen still glowing with the missed call from his sister. He had come out to them 2 years ago in a halting phone call from his tiny studio in the city, and the silence that followed had stretched into months of polite avoidance, until today when the truth somehow clawed its way back home. "Pull over, Gabriel," he muttered to himself, but the road kept pulling him forward toward the man who made every risk feel worth it. Liam's laugh echoed in his memory from that rainy afternoon 2 years earlier, when they both ducked into the same cafe to escape a sudden downpour, their soaked jackets dripping on the floor as they ordered the same overpriced latte. "Bad luck follows me everywhere," Liam had joked, his blonde hair plastered to his forehead, and Gabriel had replied without thinking, "Maybe it just led me here." That single sentence had started everything: late-night talks, shared playlists, and the slow, terrifying realization that love didn't care about the rules he had grown up with. Now, as the rain eased into a steady drizzle, Gabriel felt the weight of every choice pressing against his chest. He had built a life in Chicago working as a graphic designer for a small firm that didn't ask questions about his personal life. Liam had his own apartment in Kansas City, closer to family but far enough from Gabriel's to feel safe. They had planned this surprise for weeks, texting in code so no one would suspect. Yet here he was racing toward a celebration that might end before it began. The GPS announced 20 minutes to destination, and Gabriel exhaled, trying to shake the knot in his stomach. He pictured Liam's face, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle way he always reached for Gabriel's hand under the table. That image was enough to keep his foot on the gas. But the phone rang again, this time his father's number flashing on the screen, and Gabriel knew the storm outside was nothing compared to the one waiting inside him. He let it ring until voicemail picked up, but the damage was already done, the words "sinful" looping in his head like a curse he could never outrun. By the time Gabriel pulled into the parking lot of Liam's apartment complex, the rain had stopped, leaving the pavement glistening under streetlights that flickered like hesitant promises. He killed the engine and sat there for a long moment, staring at the cake box as if it held all the answers. 12 hours of driving and one phone call had stripped away the careful distance he had built between his two worlds. He grabbed the box and his duffel bag, then climbed the stairs to the second floor, his boots leaving wet prints that would dry long before anyone noticed. Liam opened the door before he could knock, his face lighting up in pure surprise that melted into something softer, warmer. "Gabriel, what the hell are you doing here?" Liam pulled him inside the apartment, smelling of fresh coffee and the faint trace of Liam's cologne that always made Gabriel's shoulders relax. They stood in the small living room, the cake box balanced between them, until Liam set it on the counter and wrapped Gabriel in a hug that felt like coming home after a war. "You drove all that way in this weather for my birthday?" Liam's voice cracked with emotion as he stepped back to study Gabriel's tired eyes. For a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them, the way it always did when Liam looked at him like that. But then Gabriel's phone buzzed again and the illusion shattered. He silenced it without looking, knowing it was another message from home. "They know," he said simply, the words tasting like ash. Liam's expression shifted from joy to concern in an instant. "Your family? How?" They sat on the worn couch, Liam's hand resting on Gabriel's knee as the story spilled out: the accidental social media post from a mutual friend, the screenshot sent to his sister, the chain reaction that ended with his mother's furious call. Liam listened without interrupting, his thumb tracing small circles on Gabriel's jeans, the steady rhythm the only thing keeping Gabriel grounded. "You didn't have to come," Liam whispered finally. "I would have understood." Gabriel shook his head fiercely. "I wanted to. I needed to. You're the only thing that makes sense right now." The friends arrived an hour later carrying balloons and a bottle of cheap wine, turning the tiny apartment into a bubble of laughter and stories. Gabriel forced smiles, answered questions about the drive, and tried to ignore the way his phone kept lighting up in his pocket. Later, when the guests left and the cake had been cut into uneven slices, Liam pulled him onto the balcony overlooking the quiet street. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together," Liam said, his voice steady even as rain began to patter again on the railing. Gabriel leaned into him, feeling the warmth of Liam's shoulder against his own, and for the first time since the call he allowed himself to believe it. But sleep came in fragments that night, filled with dreams of his father's disappointed face and the old church pews where he had once prayed to be normal. When morning broke, Gabriel woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Liam humming in the kitchen. The phone showed 3 new voicemails, each one more urgent than the last. He listened to the first one, his mother's voice softer now but no less final. "Come home, Gabriel. We can fix this. But not if you keep living in sin." He deleted them all, then joined Liam at the table, forcing down bites of breakfast while his mind raced ahead to the conversation he knew he could no longer avoid. The drive back toward Chicago felt longer than the one that brought him here, even though the sun had broken through the clouds, turning the highway into a ribbon of gold. Gabriel had left Liam with a promise to call every hour, but the miles stretched between them like an accusation. His family had escalated from calls to messages, flooding his phone with Bible verses and pleas from aunts he barely remembered. "We love you," his sister texted, "but we can't watch you throw your life away." Gabriel gripped the wheel tighter, the cake crumbs still scattered on the floor mat, a reminder of the celebration that now felt like a farewell. He pulled into a rest stop somewhere in Missouri, the kind with vending machines and faded maps, and sat on the hood of his car staring at the flat horizon. Memories flooded in uninvited. The summer he was 16 when his father caught him looking too long at the new boy who helped with harvest. The lecture that followed had lasted hours, ending with a warning that boys like him ended up alone and damned. Gabriel had buried it deep, convinced that college and the city would erase the shame. Meeting Liam had felt like proof that love could rewrite the script. Yet here he was running again. A text from his best friend back in Chicago popped up. "Heard things are rough, call if you need to crash." The offer was simple, but it carried the weight of years of friendship, the kind that had started in freshman orientation when they bonded over terrible dorm food. Gabriel called him then, and the conversation spilled out in fragments: the family, the drive, the fear that Liam might eventually see him as too broken to keep. "You're not sinful, Gabe," his friend said quietly. "You're just you. And that's enough." The words landed like rain after drought, but they couldn't wash away the knot in his chest. He continued driving, stopping only for gas and coffee, until the Chicago skyline rose in the distance like a promise of anonymity. His apartment felt smaller than he remembered, the walls closing in as he unpacked the duffel and stared at the empty space where Liam's spare toothbrush usually sat. Work the next day offered distraction, meetings and deadlines that kept his hands busy, but his mind wandered to Liam's last text, a simple heart emoji that somehow said everything. That evening, Gabriel sat on his fire escape, watching the city lights flicker, and made a decision. He would go home to Kansas one last time, face his family in person, and try to explain that loving Liam wasn't a choice, it was the truest part of him. The ticket was booked before he could second-guess himself, a one-way flight that felt like walking into the lion's den. Liam supported the plan, even though his voice trembled over the phone. "I'll be right here when you get back," he promised. As Gabriel packed a small bag, he wondered if love could survive the distance, or if the family he once knew would finally force him to choose once and for all. The farmhouse looked exactly as Gabriel remembered it, white paint peeling slightly around the windows, the old swing creaking on the porch where he had once pushed his sister until she screamed with laughter. His mother waited on the steps, arms crossed, her face a mask of careful composure that didn't reach her eyes. "You came," she said simply, as if he had any other option. Inside, the kitchen smelled of fresh bread and tension, his father at the table flipping through the Bible like a shield. The conversation started politely enough questions about work, the weather, anything but the reason he was there. Then his sister arrived with her husband and the room filled with voices all talking at once. "We prayed for you," his father finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "Every night since you told us. We thought you'd see the light." Gabriel felt the old shame rise, but he pushed it down, remembering Liam's steady gaze, the way it anchored him. "This isn't about light or darkness, Dad. It's about who I am. Who I've always been." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. His mother turned away, wiping her eyes, while his sister shook her head. "You're hurting us, Gabe. Can't you see that?" The accusations came faster than, each one laced with love twisted into judgment. Gabriel stood his ground, recounting the years of hiding, the nights he cried alone in college, the moment Liam made him feel seen for the first time. His father slammed the Bible shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "That man is leading you astray. Come back to us. Leave him." The ultimatum landed hard, and Gabriel felt something inside him crack, not from pain but from clarity. He had driven 12 hours through rain for a birthday cake, and now he was standing in the house that raised him, realizing it could no longer hold him. That night he slept in his old room, the walls still covered with faded posters of baseball teams and Bible verses. Sleep brought dreams of Liam waiting at the airport, the smile that always made the world feel possible. Morning brought coffee and silence until his mother sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a mug. "I don't understand it," she admitted softly. "But I see how much this hurts you." It wasn't acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall, and Gabriel took it, grasping for any thread of connection. He left that afternoon with a suitcase heavier than when he arrived, carrying not just clothes but the weight of choices that would define the rest of his life. The flight back to Chicago felt like crossing a border into freedom, yet the guilt clung to him like humidity after rain. Liam met him at the airport the moment Gabriel stepped through the gates, their embrace drawing a few curious glances that neither cared about. "You look like you fought a war," Liam said softly as they walked to the car. Gabriel laughed, despite everything, the sound surprising even him. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm of work, shared dinners, and late-night talks where Gabriel unpacked the visit piece by piece. His family sent occasional texts, careful and distant, but the silence between them grew louder. One evening a call from his sister brought new tension. "Dad's not doing well," she said, her voice tight. "The doctor says stress. He won't admit it, but we all know it's because of you." The guilt crashed over Gabriel like a wave, threatening to pull him under. He spent the night pacing the apartment, debating whether to fly back again, whether love for Liam justified the pain he was causing. Liam listened without judgment, his presence a quiet anchor. "You can't fix them by breaking yourself," he said finally. The words echoed the ones his friend had offered months earlier, and slowly Gabriel began to see the truth in them. Work offered a distraction, a new project that required long hours and collaboration with a colleague who shared stories of her own coming-out journey. "It never gets easy," she told him over lunch, "but it gets lighter when you stop carrying everyone else's expectations." Those conversations planted seeds of hope that grew alongside the relationship with Liam. They took weekend trips to the lake, sitting on the dock with their feet in the water, talking about futures that once seemed impossible. Gabriel started therapy, the kind his family would never approve of, sessions that peeled back layers of shame he had worn like armor. Liam celebrated each small victory with quiet pride, never pushing but always present. Yet the family wound festered. A letter arrived from his mother, handwritten on the familiar stationery. "We miss you. Come home for Thanksgiving." Alone. The invitation felt like a test, and Gabriel stared at it for hours, weighing loyalty against the life he had built. When he showed Liam the letter, they sat in silence until Liam finally spoke. "Whatever you decide, I'll stand by you." The choice crystallized not in a dramatic moment, but in the steady accumulation of days where Gabriel woke up next to the man he loved and felt at peace for the first time. Thanksgiving came and went without Gabriel on the farm. He spent the holiday with Liam and a small circle of friends, cooking a turkey that was slightly overdone and laughing until their sides hurt. The absence of his family stung, but the warmth in the room filled the gaps in ways he hadn't expected. His phone stayed silent most of the day until a single text from his sister arrived late that night. "Dad asked about you." We told him you were happy. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement, and Gabriel held onto it like a lifeline. Months turned into a year filled with milestones. Liam's promotion, Gabriel's first gallery show, featuring designs inspired by their journey. They moved into a bigger apartment together, the kind with a balcony overlooking the city where they could watch sunsets and plan tomorrows. The internal storm that once raged inside Gabriel quieted into a steady current of self-acceptance. He still carried the scars, the questions, the what-ifs, but they no longer defined him. One quiet evening, as they sat on that balcony with coffee cooling in their hands, Liam turned to him and said, "You drove through rain for my birthday once. I'd drive through anything for you." Gabriel smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes, and realized the journey had never been about distance or family approval. It had been about becoming the man who could love without apology. His family never fully embraced his truth, but the door stayed cracked open enough for occasional calls and cautious visits. Gabriel learned to navigate that middle ground without losing himself. Looking back at the boy who gripped the wheel through that storm, he felt a surge of pride, not for the miles driven but for the courage to keep going. In the end, love hadn't erased the pain, but it had transformed it into something stronger, something worth every tear and every mile. Was it right for Gabriel to choose his love for Liam over his family's full acceptance, or should family bonds always come first no matter the cost?